September 1812, and the streets of Moscow were swallowed in smoke, the smell of charred wood and scorched earth heavy in the air. A city abandoned by its own citizens, yet haunted by invisible presences as the French army marched in, expecting triumph but finding chaos and ruin instead. A city that had chosen fire over surrender, leaving soldiers, civilians, and spies entangled in a deadly web of survival and desperation. Among them was Nikolai Petrov, a young clerk turned volunteer scout, barely 21, with a keen eye for the hidden alleys and cellar passages, who had watched the French advance from the countryside and now moved stealthily through the smoldering streets, recording the movements of troops, the locations of food depots, and the signs of impending danger, aware that one misstep could end his life. Alongside him was Anya Sokolova, a widow whose home had been reduced to ashes, yet whose courage burned brighter than the flames, tending to the wounded, finding shelter for children, and moving silently with buckets of water and makeshift bandages, her every step a defiance against despair. And then there was Mikhail, a grizzled veteran from Smolensk, a man of 45, whose experience in border skirmishes had hardened him, but whose heart still quivered at the sight of civilians trapped by fire and marauding soldiers. As the French commander, Marshal Mortier, attempted to organize troops in the city, only to find streets blocked by barricades, hidden pits, and burned-out buildings that made progress nearly impossible, forcing him to rely on local guides who often led them into dead ends or ambushes. The city's defenders, many of them common citizens, had devised a strategy both brilliant and brutal: retreat deeper into the city, burning warehouses, homes, and granaries to deny the enemy food and shelter, while sending messages through tunnels and secret passages to coordinate with the few remaining Russian units outside the city. Nikolai and Anya found themselves at the center of one of these operations, tasked with guiding a group of civilians through a hidden canal beneath a partially destroyed bridge, the wooden beams smoldering above them, sparks falling like deadly rain, the screams of frightened children mingling with the roar of distant cannon fire. And yet they pressed on, knowing that hesitation could mean death. French troops advanced cautiously, their disciplined formations broken by sudden fires, hidden snipers and barricades, the streets littered with rubble and corpses, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder, while rumors spread that Moscow itself was cursed, a city that consumed those who sought to conquer it. Each day brought new tension. The French officers struggled to maintain order as deserters and thieves ran rampant, fires spread unpredictably, and supply lines were cut by guerrilla fighters, leaving soldiers hungry, exhausted, and paranoid. Meanwhile, Nikolai mapped escape routes, noted weak points in barricades, and delivered messages from hidden couriers, his journal later to become a rare first-hand account of life inside a city in flames. Anya, despite exhaustion, refused to rest, moving from one collapsed building to another, rescuing trapped civilians, treating burns, and keeping spirits alive with whispered songs and words of hope. Mikhail directed small bands of men to sabotage supply wagons, set traps in the alleys, and mislead French scouts, using knowledge of the city's layout gained from years of trade and travel. The French, frustrated and increasingly fearful, found themselves encircled by the intangible defenses of the city itself, smoke reducing visibility, fires altering paths, the cries of survivors masking the movement of hidden defenders, and sudden barricades halting cavalry charges. On the sixth day, a massive firestorm erupted in the central districts, fueled by abandoned warehouses filled with flammable goods. Nikolai, Anya, and Mikhail worked feverishly to guide families to safety through basements and side streets, their actions precise, coordinated, and desperate. Flames consumed entire blocks in minutes, collapsing walls and spreading embers across rooftops as French artillery tried in vain to quell the chaos. French soldiers, forced to navigate the maze-like city while avoiding both fire and hidden defenders, suffered significant casualties, their morale plummeting. Nikolai noted each movement, not only to survive, but to preserve the record of what occurred, the sacrifices, the ingenuity, and the resilience of ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. As smoke thickened, the city became almost unrecognizable. Streets turned into rivers of fire, bridges disappeared into rubble, and buildings once standing proud were reduced to smoldering skeletons. Anya, constantly drenched in sweat and soot, carried a child from a collapsed home, her strength remarkable and her voice steady as she urged him forward. Mikhail's men engaged in skirmishes along the periphery, luring French detachments into traps set amid the ruins, ensuring that even as the city burned, strategic objectives were achieved. By October, the French occupation had become untenable. Supplies were scarce, soldiers exhausted, and the city, though partially occupied, had effectively ceased to function as a logistical hub. Nikolai watched as small groups of French troops fled through the outskirts, their uniforms tattered, their formations broken, leaving behind caches of weapons and food. Anya and Mikhail, though battered and grieving for the countless lives lost, knew that the city had been defended not by armies alone, but by the courage, initiative, and sacrifice of civilians, messengers, and unsung heroes. They had turned the very destruction of their city into a weapon, delaying and disorienting the enemy, creating a legacy that would be studied by military strategists and chroniclers for generations. The burning of Moscow in 1812 was more than a military maneuver. It was a testament to the human spirit, the ingenuity that arises from desperation, and the unpredictable outcomes when ordinary people rise to extraordinary challenges. Nikolai's journals, later discovered, would reveal not just the movements of troops and the logistics of siege, but the intimate struggles, fears, and resilience of the city's inhabitants, from the smallest child clinging to her mother to veterans navigating streets that once were familiar but now belonged to chaos. Anya's courage would inspire future accounts of civilian heroism in wartime, showing that survival often depended on improvisation, determination, and compassion under extreme conditions. Mikhail's tactical acumen demonstrated that knowledge of terrain, local resources, and timing could amplify the impact of a handful of defenders against a far larger invading force. Together, their stories intertwined with the larger narrative of Napoleon's campaign, providing a human perspective to an event often reduced to numbers and strategies in textbooks. The French retreat, eventually prompted by both strategic miscalculations and the relentless pressure of scorched earth tactics, underscored how the combination of human ingenuity, environmental factors, and collective resistance could undermine even the most powerful military forces. Moscow's destruction became a symbol, a cautionary tale, and a record of resilience that transcended borders, illustrating the unpredictability of war and the enduring impact of courage, planning, and improvisation. By the end of 1812, when snow began to fall lightly over charred streets, the city lay in ruins, but its story remained alive through the eyes of those who had witnessed it firsthand. Nikolai's careful notes, Anya's unwavering dedication, and Mikhail's tactical insight ensured that the siege of Moscow was remembered not simply as a chapter in Napoleon's history, but a vivid human story of survival, resistance, and ingenuity. The streets, though silent and scarred, bore witness to lives that mattered, choices that shaped outcomes, and a collective spirit that defied occupation, illustrating how history is often written by those who endure, adapt, and act when circumstances seem hopeless,
a lesson as powerful for contemporary audiences as it was in 1812, resonating across centuries and cultures, offering a narrative rich in suspense, human emotion, strategy, and the interplay of chance, courage, and resilience that defines all truly compelling historical accounts.